Okay, here we go. All right, thanks everybody for joining us. My name is Sejal Lanterman, and I work for URI, the College of the Environment and Life Sciences Cooperative Extension. And you are participating in tonight's Learn at Home webinar series. In just a few minutes, I will introduce you to one of our favorites, even though we're not supposed to have favorites. She is Noreen Kepple, and she'll be teaching us how to put our garden to bed, which is perfect for the time of year that we were in. And also, I think because so many of us are new to gardening, and this is just very relevant information so that we can make sure we are keeping all those organisms living in our soil healthy and make sure that we have a successful season next year. All right, so if you don't mind going one more slide forward, Noreen. All right, so as you guys probably know, because we have a lot of returning visitors, we are here because of Cooperative Extension. And Cooperative Extension is the land grant of University of Rhode Island, and we're charged with bringing the research and the knowledge to the community. And we do that in a number of ways, and we organize our work into various focus areas, such as land stewardship, food systems and agriculture, water resources, energy efficiency, conservation and renewables, as well as healthy lifestyles. If you visit our website, you can click on any of these buttons. So if you clicked on land stewardship, a whole bunch of different programs would pop up, like the Master Gardener program and our invasive plant management program. So you can get a little bit of a better sense of what Cooperative Extension is and the different programs that make it up. So I urge you to take some time out of your day at some point, or maybe this weekend, and check out what else we have to offer for you. Okay, one more slide forward, please. Okay, and we have our guiding principles that guide us, and those are that we are dedicated to Rhode Island's peoples and their communities. We are committed to improving their quality of life, their livelihoods, and the health of our natural environment. We also believe in social justice and have terrific resources to learn about on our website. And collectively, we strive to deepen our cultural understanding and proficiency while building capacity to create inclusive experiences to address diverse stakeholder needs. And this is one of the reasons why I am so proud to be affiliated with URI and Cooperative Extension, and the fact that we were able to pivot so quickly at the height of this pandemic and go from offering in person to these virtual classes like you are taking here today. And I look forward to the day when I can teach in person and when we can have our Master Gardeners teaching in person as well. But I think that there is a part of us that has been shaped by this pandemic, and most likely we will continue these series and continue offering them remotely. So that's exciting as well. Next slide, please. Okay, just a few little housekeeping notes. So right after this webinar, you're going to get a brief survey, which we read every single one, and we shape everything that we are doing based on their responses. So please be brutally honest if you have to. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us how we can improve, and we'll make those changes. And also, all of our webinars are recorded, and we also offer closed captioning, so you can listen to them with the sound off. And they are available on our official URI Cooperative Extension YouTube channel. You can go right into YouTube and type in URI Cooperative Extension, and that'll pop right up. And we have a whole plethora of other workshops on there as well. It's getting really filled up with amazing different talks and events and trainings, and even farm tours and even recipes. There's so much on there. It's really cool. Okay, next slide, please. All right, one more. I think you might have gone maybe one too far. Maybe, oh no, maybe that's your first slide, Noreen, no worries. That's perfect. All right, well, so now the real reason that you guys are here is to learn how to properly put your garden to bed. And I'm really excited that we have Noreen Kepple here, who has been gardening for a very long time on her Stonington property for over 35 years. And she's been sharing her knowledge about the importance of pollinators and gardening with the public as URI Master Gardener since 2012. The vital link between providing a healthy habitat for pollinators and our own food systems has become a mission that Noreen is passionate about. Putting the garden to bed is just one of the many steps that gardeners can take to ensure a healthy ecosystem. Well, with that said, Noreen, thank you so much for your service and for your time and for connecting us to this important information. And the show is all yours.
Thank you, Sejal, and welcome to everyone who has come into this presentation tonight. Like Sejal said, I've been gardening for quite a long time. And so I'm going to show you through these slides how I put my garden to bed, and hopefully these steps will help you. If we've found out one thing during this pandemic is that gardens have been a very unifying force. It has brought people outside to enjoy the fresh air without a mask and get something to grow in your own yard. So as we all know, as we look at the days, they're getting shorter, the air is getting cooler, the color is turning on the trees. And the one thing you want to do before you start making changes and putting your garden to bed is go out and take a walk in your garden and possibly take a little paper, pencil with you, a little notepad, and look at your garden as it is now. Obviously, it's not going to be as in bloom as this one is. This was probably taken in July. But you want to ask yourself these questions. What was successful? What was not in your garden? Are there any holes in your garden where you could maybe possibly put in a new plant? Are there any plants that have grown beyond their space and you might want to divide them? Can you attract more pollinators to your garden by choosing native plants? After the heat of this past summer, maybe you would want to consider more drought-tolerant plants. Now's the time to make those changes. Do not wait for the first frost because plants turn brown, and if you're like me, once they die off, you kind of forget where they are. So you definitely want to look at your garden in bloom. So one of the things as you're walking through your garden, and this is a change that you might want to consider, see what you have blooming now. That starts blooming really August, September, October. As Sejal said, I'm passionate about the pollinators and providing nectar for them. And is there anything blooming in your garden now that the pollinators could eat? Or if there isn't, is this an area where you can improve your garden? Zinnias are a great flower to have. They bloom right up until the first frost. They provide a lot of nectar. And you can see in this picture, the monarchs and the other beneficials, they are gathering as much goodness as they can from these blooms because the monarchs, they have to make this long journey south. And this is what they're going to feed off of. You might want to consider dividing your perennials or planting new ones. So fall planting gives new transplants time to grow and establish their roots. And the work is also easier because the weather is cooler. So most garden centers or nurseries are having sales right now. They're trying to make room for their next spring's choices. And so this is a good time to maybe get some good deals on some perennials. You want to be sure to water your perennials well now because that water they will store in their roots and that will help them get through the winter months. You could leave seed heads like these black-eyed Susans in this picture, maybe coneflowers or grasses or other seed heads for the birds to eat. And an added bonus with leaving these plants up, it will also save you some extra work. So these are seed heads of black-eyed Susans that fell down in my yard during the storm. And what I do with these seed heads is I use the stems and the stalks to as mulch in my perennial beds, but I gather the seed heads and I scatter them throughout my gardens. And this provides food for the birds to eat, but it also will result in some new plants growing in my garden. So speaking of seeds, one activity that I really like to do in the fall garden is collect seeds, and I enjoy collecting flower seeds. And I label them and I let them completely dry in a cupcake tin. And then I plant them directly in the garden in the spring, or sometimes I will try planting them indoors like late February, middle of March. I have a set of grow lights. And so I can get a handle on growing maybe some more annuals or perennials in my garden. And I think if you try to save a few seeds, this is something that you would really enjoy. And speaking of seeds, this is one of my favorite plants. This is called Love in a Puff. And I'm going to put the pointer on. So this plant is a vine. It's an annual vine. So that means every spring you have to plant the seeds. And it has to be trellised. So I just made this little bamboo fence. And it has these ferny green leaves that are really, really pretty on the plant. And then it also has these teeny tiny white flowers all sprinkled throughout the plant, almost like baby's breath. And the smaller bumblebees actually pollinate into these plants. And what results is this little green lantern. It's a lime green lantern. It's a puff. And it kind of reminds me of Chinese green lanterns. And I probably have 250 or 300 of these lanterns right now all over this fence. And this is a great little seed to save. And what happens is the pod will turn this brown color. And then when you open up the pod, inside are typically 3 seeds, sometimes 2. And then the magic is that this is what happens on the seeds. Nature puts a perfect white heart on each seed. Thus it's called Love in a Puff. And it's just a great seed to save. And lots of times I save these seeds and then I mail them out to my friends in Valentine's Day cards, which is kind of a cute, usable thing to do. The next thing is natives are a great choice for pollinators, and native plants, it's a great time to plant them in the fall garden. I got these as seedlings and I nurtured them all summer so they would get a good root base. So this is purple aster. This is swamp milkweed. This is Verbena bonarensis with this cute little purple flower that the native bumblebees love. This is Asclepia. You can see it hanging off the pot here. And then this is Liatris or gay feather. All of these are great native plant choices. They all went in my garden. And the nice thing is that they all grow in clumps. So they won't spread throughout your garden. And they just really, really attract all manners of monarchs, skippers, swallowtails, and other beneficial insects. You definitely in the fall want to consider a soil test. I know a lot of people test in the spring. I like to do it in the fall, and I'll tell you why in a minute. UMass and UConn offer soil testing beyond just soil pH. And ideally, you should test your soil every 3 years. And this test will give you recommendations for soil amendments. And fall is the best time to put in those soil amendments because it has all the winter months to work those amendments into the soil. So the soil test kind of sheet looks like this. You can get samples from your yard. They give you all the instructions. So you can do flowers, veggies, lawn, fruit. And each sample will cost around $12. Now you should call ahead to these labs because with the pandemic, I'm not certain that they're open all the time. I think UConn may have just opened up just a little while ago. But it's important to do the soil testing now because if you wait until spring when everyone else is doing it, you won't get the results back quick enough. And in the spring, we all just want to get into the soil and start planting. So fall's the best time for this. And just to remember that healthy soil equals healthy plants, and it can provide a lot of problems in the future. So we get to the garden cleanup. And again, you want to water your perennials before you put your hose away. And after a killing frost, you want to pull any annuals from the pots. These are the container plants over here. And then you want to leave your perennials up. The taller ones I probably cut about halfway down, and the rest of them I just leave up. The birds will eat the seed heads, especially this coneflower here. This is the swamp milkweed over here. Hopefully that will spread. The anise hyssop, the goldfinches love this seed. And it provides winter interest in your garden. It also is a little bit less work for you. But the hollow stems you want to trim maybe down by a half or 2/3, and that's where the native bees will go in and winter over into the stems. And then you can just, pull some of these out next spring. They'll have died off enough before the new growth starts. And just don't clean up your garden too quickly in the spring. You want to wait for a few warm days in a row, because if you pull too quickly, the native bees may not have emerged yet. So here's the annual pot that I was talking about. And this pot is actually bigger than this picture shows. So what I do for my annuals, their root base is probably down about here. I pull out all of the plants with their root base. A lot of this has all died back. And so the bottom of the pot is still filled with some pretty good soil. So I like to be resourceful as a gardener. So I will take that soil and I will collect it in a big bin. And then next spring, what I will do is I'll add in a slow release fertilizer, such as Osmocote, which is a little granular fertilizer. And then I might add in some compost or some worm composting or a little bit of sterilized manure in with some new soil, a little bit of peat moss, and I mix it all together, and then I have my soil ready for my container plantings for next spring, and it starts them off really healthy. So the veggie garden, on the left we have here, pickling cucumbers. On the right is over here are tomatoes. What I do, the pickling cucumbers, Sejal and I were saying how much we pickle things during the summer. I probably picked up through mid-September. The tomatoes, they were around the same time. So I clean out all of this veggie garden here. The tomatoes, I just don't pull the roots. I cut at the soil line because I don't want to, the roots that have stored the carbon in the soil, I want to leave there undisturbed until next spring when they're very shrivelly and old, and then they're easy to come out. But I lightly rake the soil over to expose any grubs or pupae that might be in the soil. And I leave it there for a day or two so the birds can come down and eat the Japanese beetle grubs or any pupae that are in there. And so they're like a natural cleaner. And then I'll discard any of this vegetation. And I will, if it's a diseased plant or a weed, that goes in the trash. And then I will add in some organic matter, this is a very important step into my soil, such as chopped leaves, compost, grass clippings, maybe a little straw. And I mix it in just enough so it doesn't blow away. I don't want to ruin the soil structure. And then I will wet the garden down. And this organic matter will decompose over the winter months, and it will build humus to my soil. So taking care of your soil now in the fall will give your plants a nice healthy start in the spring. And one thing I also do in my raised beds, because I don't want to leave the soil bare to be open to the elements where they can lose nice nutrients, I will cover my bed with this white clover. You can also use red clover or winter rye. And this is a nice nitrogen builder into the soil. And then when it starts to, just before it starts to bloom in the spring, I will remove it or I will till it back into the soil, and then my soil will be ready to plant. I like to use grow bags. It's another way for me to add different things in my garden as far as produce. And this is on pea stone here. So I don't recommend putting them on wood because they're water permeable and the water would go down onto your wooden deck. But the grow bags, I got probably 2 crops out of each one. And they're great if your garden space is at a premium. And they last for like, well, these guys are probably like 4 or 5 years old. And the great thing is, again, you pull out your produce. I save as much soil as I can from the bag. Then I rinse the bag out, let it sit out in the sun. And as soon as it's dry, you just fold it up and put it away. And I just store it in a Tupperware container to be used for next year. Your compost, this is something that Sagel's really can educate you on, but you definitely want some kind of little compost system if you're doing a lot of gardening. And any plant debris can be put into your compost pile. But again, if it's diseased or weeds, that goes in the trash. And so your compost recipe is 3 parts brown to 1 part green. And your brown can be anything from dried leaves, pine needles, dead plants. And your green is grass, clippings, kitchen waste, or still green plants. And this is a meaningful way to add organic matter into your garden. And I read on someone's blog that next to her compost, she has just a garbage can. And in the garbage can, she has all the brown that she saves so that it's just right there handy to put into your compost pile. So I think I'll add that to my little task list this year. So after 2 or 3 killing frosts, your plants are going to go dormant. But you'll want to protect them with, I don't use mulch very much in my gardens, just in specific spots. I will definitely use chopped leaves. There's a reason why when you walk into the forest and you see the forest floor and it's covered in pine needles and chopped leaves. It's the same for your garden. To create a healthy habitat and to create cover for the beneficial insects, they love to go under any chopped leaves and or organic matter. So I strongly suggest that you cover your plants with something to protect them from the winter. Some gardeners use evergreen branches. It also helps to put nitrogen back into the soil. And a good mulch layout will also prevent any early buds from forming when we get those couple of warm days in April. And in the spring, then you can just remove this layer, kind of rake it into the garden, and do it after a few warm days in a row so that you are ensuring that any native bees or beneficial insects have already emerged out of your garden. I like to plant dahlias. I'm thinking that some of you might also, cannas or gladioli. And these are plants that grow from tubers. And so the tubers, after the first frost, all the top growth will die down, and that's when you can start to dig up your tubers. And you cut the top growth off your tuber. And then your tubers should just be brushed off with an old paintbrush, brush the soil off, let them sit in the sun for a couple of days to really dry off. And then you can pack them in open boxes. Don't close the box like I did one year, and where I lost all my tubers because they rotted out from moisture. You want to either pack them with peat moss or a little sawdust, and then you store it in a dark, humid place where they will not freeze. Some people like to use their garage, other people use their basement. You want it to be around 40 or 50 degrees until spring, and then you plant them as soon as the soil is warm enough to be worked. I have a lot of herbs in my garden, and herbs such as chives, sage, and oregano are perennial herbs. They will die back in the winter, but then they will also come back and have their new growth in the springtime. But they also like to be in a southern exposure or up near rocks, if you think of them as more Mediterranean plant. So if you're not having good luck with herbs, you might want to think about, are they in the southern exposure site, or put some rocks behind them. The rocks will warm them right up. Other herbs such as rosemary, tarragon, or basil, they're more tender, and a good frost will kill them. You will not get those back. You might consider potting them up and maybe bringing them inside to get a few more months out of them. But to enjoy fresh herbs during the winter, I cut many of my cooking herbs before the first frost, and I store them in a brown lunch bag. And I don't wash them. I just put them in the bag, seal them with freezer tape, label them, and I have to tell you that the taste is superb. And I have that fresh herb taste all through the winter. So that's kind of a fun task to do in the fall. And also cuttings. I like to take cuttings of either some of my herbs, my scented geraniums, or my begonias. And I cut the new growth that's on top of the plant. I take off any bottom leaves or flowers. I usually only leave 2 or 3 leaves at the top. And then I dip the whole stem in a root tone, which is a white powder that promotes root growth. You can get it at any Agway store, maybe Ocean State Job Lot carries it. And then I just put it in a vase with water. And what happens is about 10 to 14 days, sometimes it takes longer, roots will appear. And when there are enough roots, I just pot it up in a potting mixture, put it on a sunny windowsill or sometimes under my grow lights. And then I have a whole new plant to plant for the following spring. I grow raspberries. I grow them in a raised bed, believe it or not. They seem to behave very well there. My raspberries are summer bearing. So what I will do is probably next week, I will take the strongest brown canes for every foot of my row, and I will leave 6 canes. And those will be my raspberries for the following spring and summer. If you have fall-bearing raspberries, you want to cut the canes down right after they fruit, and then you'll just get new canes that will grow next year. And I picked fresh berries for about a month this summer, so I had really quite a good crop, and my freezer is full of fresh raspberries. My strawberries I put in a big black kettle pot. You want to pick off any dead leaves. These will be covered with either chopped leaves or straw to protect them from any winter burn. Strawberry plants usually peter out after 3 years. They call that the mother plant. So you really want to take the mother plant, if you think it's about 3 years old, you want to take that off and discard it and put it in your compost pile. And then the runners that have the babies, you want to just put those back into the soil so that you continuously have strawberries for your garden. Container care is another area that I take pretty good care of. I wash my containers out, maybe use that old paintbrush to brush out any extra soil. And then I line them with newspaper. I have spent too many times trying to get one pot out of another because it has stuck. So the newspaper helps to keep them and then store them away where they will not hit freezing temperatures, either in a basement or a garage or a shed. And then same with your tool care. Your tools, you want to brush off any soil. I like to wipe mine with a coat of vegetable oil. This helps to prevent any rust buildup, keeps them nice and clean. And then I buy a beach bucket. Generally, I get a bright colored one so that I know where it is in my tool shed. And the tools that I use the most, I store in sand so that I have easy access to them. And also it keeps them clean and pretty sharp. So that's just a little tip I can give you. Any hoses or sprinklers, you definitely want to turn off your outside water before we do get a frost. And you want to unhook your hoses and drain them. Then bundle and store the sprinklers. They also should be free of water and hung to dry. Any water that's left in, and if it freezes, that's what will crack your hose. Which brings us to rain barrels. So you want to drain your rain barrels by opening up all the spigots before winter. And you don't want the water to freeze because that will crack your rain barrel. And once drained, I like to turn my rain barrel upside down because this is where the water kind of sits. So I turn it upside down. I leave it upside down for the winter. Any hoses that are attached to your rain barrel, you also want to make sure that they're drained. And then what I do is this spout diverter I will replace with an expandable flexible extension to bring it down, to redirect the water away from, this is my garage. You don't want any water standing here near your foundation. So those flexible extensions to your rain gutters are really healthy to, good to get. Fall bulbs is a great thing to plant in the fall. This is where they get their nice root development. If you're like me, you'll forget where you plant them, but then they're nice surprises in the spring and you get to see the magic happen. Sajal and I were just talking about planting. I think it might be, unless you have row covers, a little bit late to plant some seeds, but I planted these a few weeks ago and I have a great crop of Swiss chard. Next to this, you can't see it, I have a great crop of spinach. These are carrots coming up, which are now about this high. And so these guys, peas, lettuce, spinach, they like cooler night temperatures. So I actually do a lot of seed planting, probably right up till about mid-September. So that might be something that you might want to consider for next year. My house plants. Typically, I bring my house plants in. These were inside, and I bring them out for their summer residency. And you want to bring them in around mid-September. And what I do is I make sure that I pick off any dead leaves. I look for any that might have outgrown their pot. This is a great time to find a new pot, go the next size up. And the one thing that I definitely do is I spray all of my houseplants with insecticidal soap. Make sure you get the underside of the leaves as well as the top. Give them a good spraying and leave them outside for a few days just to make sure it's worked. And even when you bring your plants in, you do want to make sure that you don't bring them in with any of your other houseplants that maybe stayed in all summer. You definitely want to make sure that they're pest-free. Another thing is that you definitely want to leave a part of your yard messy. I think as gardeners, we sometimes tend to clean up almost too well. And you can have a brush pile filled with leaves, dead branches, old stumps, or just a messy area in your yard that you leave untouched. Beneficial insects and native bees will call this home for the winter. And plus, it then also saves you some work because that's an area that you don't have to deal with. Your lawn, you want to mow your lawn while the grass is still growing. You don't want to leave your lawn too long. If you leave it long and it snows, then those long twigs of grass will make brown patches on your lawn. I don't really do that much to my lawn. As you can see, I have dandelions in my lawn. I have clover. I have about 8 raised beds in my yard, and I had a plethora of bunnies like a lot of gardeners did this spring. The bunnies never went into my raised beds because really what they are happy eating is this clover and these dandelions, and I would see them just sitting in my yard wondering, did they get to my lettuce? And nope, they never did. But you do want to maybe consider your last couple of mowings, leave the grass clippings on your lawn, and that will add some nitrogen back into your soil. Definitely these bees and these native bees will work right through a first frost and well into mid-November. They have bodies that are covered in fur. And so any blooms that you have in your yard right now, I strongly encourage you not to cut them, just leave them up for the bees to have that nectar and that pollen that they're trying to get to bring back to their nests. And they're just the real workhorses of our gardens. This is a bee house that's close to my garden. One day I looked and there were these little grass plugs that you can see coming out of it. And I kind of wondered what it was, and I had never seen it before. And so I researched it, and I found out that it is quite possibly a grass-carrying wasp, which I found out is a gentle pollinator. It's probably no bigger than a large ant, has a very thin waist with, of course, wings. And what it does is it leaves dead insects in the hole for its larvae to eat. and then it plugs the hole with grasses. And this happened, I found this at the end of July, and sure enough, this grass carrying wasp does do this process in July and August. And so you want to make sure that your bee houses are out of the rain and sheltered if you have them. Mid-spring is the time to clean them. But remember, you do not need a bee house if you just leave up some of your hollow flower stems. The bees will definitely find those. Fall's a great time to organize your garage or your shed. I just did this weekend. And as gardeners, we tend to collect a lot of tools. So maybe go through your tools and donate what you do not use to a school garden or a community project. We also want to maybe look at any chemicals that we might have or that are out of date, and maybe take them to a fall hazardous waste day. And if you spend organizing time now, you'll be able to spend more time gardening in the spring, and that's really what we want. I just want to thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you learned some tips, and Sejal and I are open for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome. Noreen, there is so much good feedback coming in. So many awesome questions. It was so great to get a little taste of everything, and it definitely got my wheels turning. So I think we need to jump right into the questions. And before I just do that, I'll just do a quick small plug, since it's right up there on the screen, for our URI Master Gardener program. We have applications being accepted right now. We do anticipate that we'll fill up. We are doing online courses this year, and we have so much in store as we go into this food focus. So I'm very confident that there are probably some strong candidates in tonight's class, evident by all these great questions that we are getting in. So I'm just going to start off, Noreen.
Okay, Sejal.
So right in the beginning, we had someone ask about, I think you were talking about the puff plant. And yes, folks are wondering, is that a native? Is it problematic? Is it invasive? Or, where does that fall on the spectrum?
So that's an annual vine, so it's not invasive. It's also not a native. I just think it's just the coolest plant. My grandson loves it. He knows not to open it up until the pot turns brown. So it's a vine. It will grow on a trellis or on a porch railing, but it's not a vine that goes crazy. It gets about 3 or 4 feet high. I have mine in a container with bamboo trellis on it, and it has just done wonderful. And I just think it's just one of those plants that we should all share with one another, because it's just a great little plant. And it is a pollinator plant, I found out, because the native bees love to go into those tiny white flowers.
Well, there you go. And how fun is it to train the grandkids and the kids? My kids now touch on the soil. They stick to the chippy wood path. Okay, so the next question is, what's your take on the home pH nutrient test kits? Are they any good? Are they a waste of money? Or should we just send folks to our URI Master Gardeners for free pH testing? What are your thoughts on those home kits?
I think that they will definitely test the pH of your soil. So if that's what you're going for, I always think that you can get a little bit more from our URI Master Gardener soil testing, because they will also test for pH, but they will also tell you what amendments that you can put directly into your soil and what is good for you. And then, you never just ask a master gardener just one soil question. You ask them many questions. So to talk to someone in person is much better. I also promote the soil tests through UMass or UConn, because they really look at the nutrients in your soil and see what's lacking, and they will give you the recommendations for amendments.
Okay, that's great. Let's see. Next question about ornamental grasses. When is the best time to cut that back, fall or spring? And this particular person would like to divide and transplant them.
Okay, well, I know dividing them can be a task, because their root systems are very, very strong and fibrous. So the one that made me go out and buy what's called a spade head shovel. And it's a shovel that is, it's shaped like a spade. It comes down to a point about maybe 2 inches and it digs right into the plant. So that's my first recommendation. You can probably get it on Amazon. It's called spade head shovel. And I would get the long handled version, not the short one. And you can cut your grasses down now. Lots of people leave their grasses up because the native bees like to burrow inside into that like dense growth in the middle. So it's kind of what you want to do. And if you want to attract those native pollinators, then I would say leave them up and then cut them down next spring.
Yeah, I agree. I love the winter interest that the grasses provide, as well as even the hydrangea blooms that are still on there and
Exactly.
the dead echinacea heads. Like, to me, it's just, there's something to look at. I know sometimes it's easy just to get that weed whacker out and just take it all down, but why not leave it up for a little bit longer and do that in the spring? I agree with you on
When
that.
it snows, all the snowflakes all attached.
Oh,
to all that, so
no,
that's
I
pretty.
know it. I know. I love winter interest. I'm a big fan. Okay, so lots of questions on preventing and getting rid of squash bugs.
Well, the easiest thing is to maybe spray that insecticidal soap. I don't really use any pesticide in my garden at all. I will say that I plant my squash much later than most people because the squash bug has a cycle that will naturally cycle off. And so I don't plant my squash until late July. And pretty much then the squash bug life cycle is over. I did get a few this year, and I just hand pick them off and put them in hot soapy water. I have a little mason's jar with me when I do that. So I would try insecticidal soap. There is a thing called Monterey Disease Control, which is also an organic type of plant control that you can use also.
Yep. Okay. That's great. And I agree too. Sometimes, when as long as we're not, growing huge fields of it, sometimes our fingers are our best control there. And my boys are good at squashing those squash bugs. Okay. So the next one is in regards to tomatoes. There's a lot of tomato questions actually in terms of sourcing a different location for them next year, what to do if you found disease. I think a lot of us know that a lot of tomato diseases originate in the soil. Should we get our soil tested to make sure there's nothing going on? Should we move our tomatoes? So just speak tomatoes to us for a few minutes.
Yeah, well, tomatoes or any other plant, you should definitely rotate your crops every year. So never grow the same crop in the same spot, because really what you're doing is you're just sending an invitation out to all those pests, because they'll know that you're growing in the same spot. So you kind of want to stay one step ahead of the pests and fool them. So I'm always rotating my crops. The other thing is you might want to consider is, like, I like to plant onions or shallots or garlic around the edge of my garden, and that seems to be a nice natural pest deterrent. I know people do use marigolds. The marigolds, I think it's kind of an old way to do it. It can work. And tomatoes, they are heavy feeders, and so definitely they will take up all of the nutrients in your soil. Some tomato roots can go 100 feet long, depending on the variety. So I think soil testing, especially if that's the only place you're going to test and you love tomatoes, then test the soil where you would plant your tomatoes.
Yep, that sounds great. Okay, any tips for keeping chipmunks from eating berries? Yeah.
That's why my strawberries are in that big black kettle pot, and it worked for 1 year. They didn't do too bad this year. Chipmunks they're just very crafty little pests. So I actually name them in my yard, and, I have stone walls, so they love to go in there. So, maybe just put out some almonds or something near their hole and try to deter them and distract them. Give them something that they like to eat, and then maybe they'll leave your berries alone.
I know the worst is when they take like one bite and then they move
Exactly.
along. It's like, really? Really? Okay, so any tips? So that was great that you were mentioning like cleaning out our pots. That's really great for disease prevention as well, for doing a lot of container gardening. What about washing those cloth grow bags? Any tips there?
I don't wash my cloth grow bags. I feel like I just lay them out, spray them with the hose, good pressure hose, put it on full blast, and then lay them out in the sun. And I've never had a problem, and I've used mine for 4 or 5 years now.
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. Let's see. Person asked a question about white clover. So you plant it, and then should you put leaves or mulch over it?
I would wait till it comes up a little bit, and then you can put in some. I just did my beds. I have all raised beds. I think I mentioned that. So what I did is I added my amendments into my soil, and I put in the chopped leaves, and I kind of turned it over a little bit, and then I planted the white clover. So I'm going to see how that works out this year. But be creative. Do one bed one way and another way, and then see what works best for you.
Okay, so some more quote unquote pest questions in regards to groundhogs. Tips for getting rid of groundhogs as well as tomato hornworms.
Well, tomato hornworms, I don't really have that many of them. I think I've had one in all my gardening years. And he wasn't even on a tomato plant, he was on a flower. And I saw him. The tomato hornworms, you just have to hand pick off. If they do have little white egg cases on their skin, you want to leave them, because those are the parasitic wasps that are laying their eggs in, and the larvae will actually feed off of the tomato hornworm's body. I know that sounds gross, and it will just die naturally. But you definitely just want to pick those off. And the groundhog question, I don't have groundhogs, and don't be mad at me, but I just don't. So I know people that have done all kinds of fencing, but the groundhogs, man, they can dig. I don't know if you have any solutions
Yeah,
for groundhogs, Angel.
that is. I also am fortunate enough to not have that problem. It can be really, really tricky. We do have some really great folks, master gardeners, that help answer a lot of our hotline questions. And one person that comes to mind, he is really good with pests and critters. So if, for those of you that are having some serious groundhog issues, if you want to email us, we can try to send you some other tips. But no, that is not my issue. While I've got other issues, that's not one of mine.
I will say, Sejal, though, I have 2 dogs, and I think the dogs are a great deterrent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Not only for, that they go out in the yard to do their bathroom duty, but also the barking. I think any groundhog would be real silly to come into my yard, so maybe consider getting a dog.
Yeah, right. There you go. That brings on its own sets of issues. Let's see. Vegetables. So for a vegetable garden, do you suggest any winter crop cover plants? I think you covered a few. Do you want to just say
the winter rye, the red clover, the white clover, they all work quite well.
Okay. Where do you store your paper bags with the herbs? And I think there was another question about how you freeze them. I was answering a question at that point, so I'm not quite sure what the question was in regard.
Yeah, so you go out and cut your fresh herbs, don't wash them, put them in a brown lunch bag. It's very simple. Put freezer tape, label them, and just put them in the freezer. So anywhere in the freezer where you're going to find them, and then be able to use them for cooking during the winter.
Okay, so that answers that one. Let's see. Oh my gosh, you guys, so many questions. We're never going to be able to answer all of these. I'm doing my best here. We do have our gardening hotline. Actually, if you want to go one more slide forward, Noreen, just so folks have that information. If we didn't get your question answered tonight, I'm going to ask Noreen a few more, but you can literally email any of these pictures that you have of let's say a plant, you don't know what it is, or a weed or an insect. You can send a picture to gardner@uri.edu, your question. Someone will get back to you rather quickly. So if we didn't answer your question, please, please, please ask it there and we will have the experts answer them. Let's see. So we got some raspberry questions. How do you select the stems to keep for summer bearing raspberries?
So you want your strongest cane. So, I mean, that's going to be kind of subjective for you. But I mean, if it looks like it's kind of dying off, then you want to get rid of that. So the 6 strongest canes that you can find for every foot of your row, and just cut all the others, and then the energy will go into those, and then they will produce for you for the following spring and summer.
All right. Do you sharpen your own tools? And if you do, how do you do it? If not, where do you go?
No, I don't sharpen my own tools. There was a man who had a mobile truck, and he used to visit our local farmers market. And so I would bring my tools there, and he would sharpen them there while I went shopping, and they were all set when I came back. So, you know, maybe Google your area to see if there's someone that does that, or, you know, go to there might be a service that is provided at one of your farmers markets, but he was very busy.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. Where is that man? I think we also, I feel like we also had towards the beginning a webinar on tools and taking care of your tools. And I'm wondering if that's available on our YouTube. Someone might want to look for that as well. Let's see. This person was told to wait after the first frost to pick kale. It was growing beautifully, and this week it's totally covered with bugs. Had to pull it all out and trash. Is the soil damaged now in the raised bed?
I don't know what kind of a bug it is. It probably was aphids is what I'm thinking. Yeah, you might want to, I don't know how big your raised bed is, but I don't think you'd have to take all the soil out, but maybe just the first little bit of layer. The bugs probably went more to the kale than into your soil. They were looking for it depends on what bug that it was.
Okay, so if you weren't quite sure, you can email us at the Gardener hotline, describe that bug.
Yeah, that'd be a perfect one for them.
Yeah, we can be more detectives for you. How do you deal with flower-headed, still intact hydrangeas at this time? I don't do anything. Do you do anything with your hydrangeas? I leave them.
Most of mine are still on my bushes, but about a week or 10 days ago, I did cut some, and I like to dry them upside down. They get that like blue, purpley, kind of greenish kind of look to them. And I just dry them upside down inside my shed, and then I will just make some dried flower arrangements for the fall, you know, since it's too cold to be outside. So you could consider doing that.
Okay, there you go. So more of a crafting solution, but really, if you don't want to do anything, you don't have to do anything.
Just leave them. Yep.
Just leave them. Yep. Usually the wind will take them at some point. Let's see. Oh, I just had another one. Oh. How can you elaborate on the best way to store your dahlias and your other bulbs? I did the basement in paper bags. Oh, the question just left me. I think every time somebody asks another question, so it's hard for me to stay on the question for too long. So just if you could just go into some tips and tricks for storing your bulbs, like your dahlias.
So the dahlias, you want to wait for the first frost, and then you will cut off all of the top growth, and then you will dig up the tubers and brush the tubers off. One year I washed them off with my hose, and that was a big mistake. And I look on gardening as the greatest leveler, because you think you know something and then you do something and you don't know it at all. And so it teaches us. So I now brush my tubers off with an old paintbrush, get all the soil off. I let them sit in a southern exposure in the sun for a couple of days to really dry out. And then I pack them in milk crates that are open. I pack them in either peat moss. Generally, that's what I use, the peat moss. And I leave the top off. And then I put them down in my basement, about 40 to 50 degrees. And then I check them about once a month. And I've had good luck doing that. So I hope you have good luck too. I know someone who stores them in her garage, though, and they do fine. And she never checks them.
Well, there you go. I wish it was that easy for me. Let's see. A couple questions on garlic. So this particular person planted garlic last fall, grew nicely all summer, but yielded such tiny bulbs. Any recommendations for a big fat garlic?
It depends maybe on the garlic that you chose. So like Sajal said, you want to get it from a good source. Generally, again, a farmer's market where it hasn't had any pesticide on it. I use the purple Chinook. That's just what I prefer. It's the hardneck garlic. And what I do, I had like 86 bulbs this year. And so I take the biggest bulbs, and that becomes my seed garlic for next year. And so I just split the bulb open. There's about 8 cloves, fat side down, thin side up, 6 inches down, 6 inches apart. It's like a grid. Water it. Again, you might want to test your soil. Maybe your soil was somewhat depleted and didn't have enough. I do in the hole when I plant the clove, I put in a little bit of bone meal. That's good because it produces, it promotes root development, and it's a root crop. And I had great garlic. So I hope those tips help you.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I was looking at the chat, and you might have mentioned this, but would you also recommend making sure that if you wanted to have those nice big fat bulbs, that you're cutting the scapes when the scapes come?
Right, at the end, I cut my scapes. Well, it depends if I'm on the garden tour for URI or not,
Yeah.
but I cut my scapes probably once they come out, maybe a week after they come out. And then the stem you can use to make garlic pesto. The scapes are edible. You can put them in a stir fry. And when you cut the scape off, that's going to send the energy back down into the bulb. But if you leave the scape on, then a lot of that energy is going to go up because it thinks that it's flowering and it's got to produce a flower. So I don't know if you did that or not.
Yep, there you go. And oh, we love grilled garlic scapes. So you had mentioned bone meal. Any other amendments that you are partial to?
For garlic or?
No, I think just in general. This question is about amendments in general. And I'm sure you're going to, mention it's hard to know what amendments you need to use unless you get a soil test to figure out exactly what does your soil need.
I think you can't go wrong if you add in chopped leaves, straw, maybe some compost if you have compost, and worm composting. I mean, any of those are going to do great things for your soil.
All right, we're not going to keep you too much longer. I'm just going to wrap it up with a few more. This is a good one to kind of get us to be better gardeners. What about any books? Do you have any books or websites that you just can't live without for newbie gardeners?
Oh boy, I have a ton of books. Hang on a minute. Let me go grab some.
Oh my gosh, that's great. She's going to bring her whole library. Let's see, you guys are asking really great questions. Let's see, maybe just one more. Okay, got it. Got one more. I feel like I'm picking bingo numbers here.
All right, Sajal, here's one. The Complete Compost Gardening Guide.
Oh my God, I love it.
That's by Pleasant and Martin. And then there's one, The Edible Front Yard. That's by a woman named Soler, Soler, The Edible Front Yard. Mastering the Art of Vegetable Gardening. That was actually one of our speakers from, I think, a year or two ago at the,
the symposium.
Garden Symposium. And the other one is called Down and Dirty by Ellen Zachos, Zachos. So any of those books I think you'll find helpful.
Okay, that's awesome. And one last question, and this is about blueberry plants. Do you have any advice on what we should be doing for our blueberry plants in the winter?
I don't really do much for my blueberry plants. I just kind of leave them. I know that they like pine needles around their base because they like an acidity, an acidic soil. So that might just be something you might want to do. And I just leave mine alone. They're actually a native plant.
Yeah, they do quite well. I'd say the only other thing that I do is probably a late winter, early spring pruning.
Yes.
Yep. That's about it too. Well, Noreen, you are such a rock star. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Given us a lot to digest. I think none of us are out of gardening chores for this weekend. There's still a lot to do. There's always stuff to do, but I think a lot of us have some time right now. So thank you. And
you're welcome.
Yeah, this was really great. And this is being recorded. And the questions as well. So this will all be there. It will take a few days, and we have these wonderful volunteers that go in and make sure all the closed captioning is right. So we just need to give them just a little bit of time, but this, as well as all our webinars, our next webinar will be next Tuesday. We have some really exciting ones coming up. One on taking care of your well, if you're a private well owner, especially if you're growing food, the importance of getting your well tested. But of course, just for drinking water and all those other hundreds of uses we use our water for, but really important stuff there. And another one coming up, Noreen, I'm so excited. We're going to learn about some of the research that's being done on maple syrup. So,
nice.
I know some of these isolated compounds that are being shown to prevent all these different things. So I'm so excited about that with Dr. I can't think of his name, Noreen Surindra. It's just going to be awesome. So excited about that. So every Tuesday at 7 p.m. And for those of you that still have questions, please contact us, and we'll see you next week, hopefully. Thank you again, Noreen.
Thank you, Sajal. You can put your feet up when the gardening catalogs come in.
Oh, I know. Oh my gosh, isn't that the best? I know bird season is among us. I know. Watch the birds and pick out the seeds and count the days for fresh tomatoes till next year.
That's right. Happy gardening, everyone.
Take care, everyone.